critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and the crusade against American history is toxic propaganda.
I want to laugh when I read this, but what I remember is this is the tactic that was used by the South to rewrite history about what the Civil War meant. The reason they are doing it now is because it has worked in the past, and it will. Now we have this.
The suggestion that simply pouring money into public schools is somehow going to be the solution has been belied by nearly every independent study ever done of public education. Obviously, we should be spending more on schools where not enough spending is going on, where there aren't school books or there aren't enough desks. But the real problem that's existing in educational performance has very little to do with income and a lot more to do with the access to educational opportunity provided in homes. If you have a single-family home, it is very difficult for mom to be able to help with homework. If you don't allow kids to go to better schools outside their neighborhood, rather than simply pouring money into...
Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
It's easy enough to say that we all have a role in making the system better, but when you suggest very few practical solutions other than rote democratic policies that have been failed nearly every time they've tried, it makes it difficult to believe this isn't just a political ploy, rather than an argument in favor of bettering individual human lives. To deny the effects of history would be idiotic. History obviously has consequences. And to deny that racism exists would be similarly idiotic. But to attribute every problem in American life to racism or inequity is to be foolish and counterproductive and not to make the world a better place.
And it's funny, except it's not. Our history is being stolen from us. Historical black universities and colleges, pioneers of school choice. Living proof that when more options are provided to students, they are afforded greater access and greater quality. And now the president is saying we're going to have to stop federal funding to these schools because that would be racist. And then this happened in 63. Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, and just a few weeks later, the Confederate flag was flying over the University of Alabama. And in September of 1963, these 4 girls got blown up in this church. When the terrorist shooting in Orlando happened, I was horrified by that carnage. And I thought, you know, I don't even have the adjectives to shooting in American history. Now, if you hear news reports about it today, most of them have been modified. And what they say is it's the largest mass shooting by one person in American history. Because what came to mind for me were these. Got blown up in this church. This was the young girl that survived. And if you want to see the faces of people who have directly experienced terrorism, you don't have to go to the 9/11 photographs. You don't have to go to the first World Trade Center bombing. You don't have to go to Oklahoma City. These are the faces of people watching the bodies being taken out of the church. You remember Ronald Reagan's campaign advisor? When Ronald Reagan was nominated for President of the United States, the first campaign speech that he made was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and it was about states' rights. And I guarantee you, the people in Philadelphia and Mississippi knew exactly what he was talking about.
The 400 years that I've existed.
What are you going to do with them?
Well, that does not concern you. We give you 5 days to decide, and the offer is non-negotiable. We will not try to coerce you in any way. Yet, I hope we can do some business together.
Well, I see the first aspect of this is to prevent the problem from becoming worse by dysgenics. This first word that
Would you
that
translate
I mentioned.
dysgenics for me and the audience?
What I
Would that be
is
sterilization?
No. Dysgenics, you see, means what that other chart I showed you says.
Should blacks,
that the least effective element.
Should blacks be sterilized?
No. I have a...
but if blacks are a problem and we do not allow...
This is inhumane. And
Dr.
I think
Shackley
one can
wants
find more
black
humane
people to
solutions to this.
Well, then how would... Then,
I would propose something in which one of the key clauses, phrases, is regardless of sex, race, or welfare status. And this is the...
Look, the space traders seem perfectly nice and civil. Their planet might be one great big Club Med for all we know.
Status. And this is the proposal. I call it a thinking exercise. It's mentioned in that pamphlet that I showed that you can obtain. And it goes this way, that you would offer a bonus to everyone to be sterilized. Now, we know we have a population explosion problem. We know that in India that bonuses in the form of transistor radios are offered to people.
Would this bonus be directed to black people specifically, more than whites?
Mr. Brown, what did I say just a moment ago? I said, regardless of sex, race, or welfare status.
Now, there is a group...
That's what I say.
There is a group of white people to whom this offer should be made also.
Absolutely. Now the offer is based upon the best estimates, best scientific estimates that one can have of any genetically carried disabilities. Now there are some, I think, that any humane person would have no doubt about. And Dr. Welsing talked about dominant and recessive genes. I want to point out that sometimes a dominant gene can be a very bad thing, and it is a very bad thing for a neurological disease called Huntington's chorea, which is something like multiple sclerosis.
Which is more prominent in white people than black people.
That is correct. And I think that one should offer a large bonus for anyone who might be potentially carrying Huntington's chorea.
Dr. Shackley,
Beyond this, it goes on with some other factors in this, but Dr. Welsing wishes to speak.
Are you aware that white people have more genetic diseases that affect their nervous system than people of color, than black people?
I wouldn't be at all surprised. And I think blacks apparently have higher heart problems.
Would you suggest that all of these white people who are carrying these defective genes, you know, whose families may carry these defective genes, that they be examined and it would be suggested to them that they be sterilized? Would you suggest this?
Yes, I think I would, probably, in general.
I came to the unfortunate discovery that the only way to wrest the power you want is to wrest it, that you cannot persuade. You cannot...
I expect them to be thrilled, but how can I put this delicately? Their future electoral clout is going to be severely limited.
Casper, let's be honest. Do you really think the aliens will treat them worse than we have?
Thank you.
Let me just say this. What is very interesting is in the study of biology, biologists who have studied evolution, one of the very interesting things that they say is that the more functional skin pigment cells in the animal kingdom, the higher you are on the scale of phylogenetic ascension. In other words, nature in the course of evolution went to its highest state when it produced a cell that could produce pigment, and that we were sliding backwards. The mutation to albinism is a step backwards in the scale of evolution. Are you aware of that, Dr. Shackley?
The decision has to be the will of the people and not the administration policy.
How about a national referendum? Have MCI fire up a couple of those yes and no 900 numbers.
Well, today is the day of reckoning for 20 million Americans of African descent. Voting will begin in just a few seconds from now. As you know, 2 telephone numbers will appear on your screen, one in favor and one against the space trader's offer. After dialing the number of your choice, simply key in your personal security code. Here, ladies and gentlemen, are the 2 numbers. Polls will remain open for the next 3 hours, but we should be able to project a decision very shortly.
Yes.
And I would think it probably would have been negative.
No, it was not. It was positive.
Well,
the motor skills on the Giselle schedule indicated that earlier precocious walking children, there was a correlation between that and high intelligence.
This may be true. It might be true within a group. I'm not sure of that.
Well, maybe
I know that there is a correlation in terms of things earlier than walking. At the 6-month stage, Nancy Bailey at Berkeley has established that white children who come from the most advanced families and who later, when they become older, are out at the top, at the first 6 months they are relatively retarded compared to children who are from families of less accomplishment and who don't go as far. But this, so there are a number of these things certainly to be brought in.
Fine.
But this
Giselle schedule is a very authentic, accepted, institutional, psychological experiment.
And so is the Nancy Bailey early test.
I'd like to take another call at this point.
My people, oh, my people, the sit-ins and the boycotts of work.
Major motivation for racism in this country is the deeply held belief that black people should not have anything that white people don't. Not only do whites insist on better jobs, higher incomes, better neighborhoods, better schools, but they leap to gobble up our language, our dress, our music, and our dance. Therefore, I propose that from now,
that you cannot persuade. You cannot. It's a repudiation of the Mahatma Gandhi view. But if you want to break the laws against miscegenation and racial separation, you've got to do sit-ins, break the law. You've got to storm the Bastille. If you want to, if you want to promote the cause of feminism, you've got to burn bras and capture the giant's attention somehow. I came to the conclusion that that those who hold power will hold it very closely and are never willing to share it.
Well, just follow the money. Right now, it's perfectly legal to buy political influence in America.
don't count your chickens before they come home to roost.
Oh, somebody bring me some milk, because here come a big Oreo.
Yes, yes.
To anyone who believes that America is institutionally racist, I'll challenge you to do this. There is no industry in the South that has replaced the slave trade and what could be worked on by slaves. The mayor of New York City recommended that New York, not the state, the city, withdraw from the Union during the Civil War. Why was that? If you go and read, it's because we are making so much money from slavery, we want to keep doing it. If we withdraw, we can then be friends with the North, then we can be friends with the South. They are saying it to you as plainly and as directly as they can. And so the people today who say the folks honored in these monuments were not fighting for slavery, my response is, I understand that that's what you want to believe. And I understand how difficult it is to wrap your mind around the fact that human beings, fellow Americans, would fight, kill other people, and die to preserve slavery. It's really hard to wrap your mind around that. But that is the ugly truth. If you read that quote from Abraham Lincoln, I was raised to understand that Abraham Lincoln was my savior. I was taught that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves because he knew that slavery was an abomination. Abraham Lincoln said on many occasions, if I could preserve the Union and keep slavery, I'd do it. If getting rid of slavery is what it takes to preserve the Union, I'll do that too. What his goal was to preserve the Union. And I just want you to know that the debate about reparations for slavery is a completely false debate. First of all, go back to 1988 when Ronald Reagan was in office. Passed with almost no dissent was a bill giving $20,000 to every Japanese American family that was interned during World War II. That was absolutely appropriate. $20,000 doesn't even begin to compensate those families for what was taken from them, for what they lost, and for being essentially imprisoned for the term of World War II. At least it was some acknowledgement that what we did was wrong. If you talk about reparations for slavery, $20,000 for 4 years of internment, what is it for 256 years of slavery? And here is the kicker. Reparations were already paid because in the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln set aside $1 million for DC slave owners to be compensated for loss of property. This is our history.
Go into communities and deal with problems by examining the roots of those problems.
We've already talked about the Indian Removal Act. In the middle of the Civil War, the government still was doing what white supremacy demands, which is favoring the white class over everyone else. And I'll give you a perspective on this that's interesting.
But fortunately, we later dealt with that problem. Oh, we never fix the problems. We only fix the things that are fine. Oh, one of the reasons American history is so important to me is I want us as a country to summon the courage to deal seriously with our problems. Sometimes I think that we're just so cowardly, like we're the cowardliest country on earth.
Oh, what about France?
If you guys are the type of people that get offended by me doing something, then I don't have control over that. I don't care if you burn the flag, because I just don't.
That's your right.
Yeah, I don't care. But if you're going to really get mad about it.
He wasn't fighting for slavery, he was fighting for the South. It is the punishment of the South that its Robert Lees and Jefferson Davises will always be tall, handsome, and well-born. Their courage will be physical, not moral. Their leadership will be weak compliance with public opinion and never costly and unswerving revolt for justice and right. It is ridiculous to excuse Robert Lee as the most formidable agency this nation ever raised to make 4 million human beings chattel instead of men and women. Either he knew what slavery meant when he helped maim and murder thousands in its defense, or he did not. If he did not, he was a fool. If he did, Robert E. Lee was a traitor and a rebel, not a hero. I feel for the family of Robert E. Lee that's alive today, because this must be a really difficult time for them. This is the price you pay when you live a lie, when your view and understanding of history is based on a lie. Because when the truth comes to town, it really hurts when you're ripping that lie off. And when you talk about the rhetoric that we have today about our military and about American soldiers and what we owe to the people who put their lives on the line, this man was slaughtering American soldiers. And they built a monument for him. Everybody remembers the Edmund Pettus Bridge and Bloody Sunday. Heck, they made a movie about it. But who was Edmund Pettus? Well, that's who Edmund Pettus was. The grand of the Alabama KKK. And that bridge was dedicated not in 1865 or 1870, but in 1940. And we'll come to that timing as we go through this, because the timing of these monuments, I think, suggests something that's very important in terms of understanding what they're about. Because on Thanksgiving Eve in 1915, William Joseph Simmons took these things to Stone Mountain, Georgia. He took bricks where he made an altar. He took the American flag. He took the Holy Bible. He took an unsheathed sword, and he took a cross. And he made himself the new imperial wizard of the KKK. That's what Stone Mountain, Georgia is. It is a monument to the KKK. Now, its history is interesting. That's what it looks like. It is the largest bas relief in the world. Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Conceived in 1912 by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Deeded to the United Daughters in 1916. They started working on it with the KKK in 1922, but it was abandoned for 36 years until the state of Georgia purchased it and created the Stone Mountain Memorial Association to complete the project, and it was completed in 1972. So, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. And what greets me as a citizen of Tennessee when I go to my state capital in Nashville, where my grandparents lived, this is what I see. Nathan Bedford Forrest. And you can see Confederate States Army, Lieutenant General, and his birth date and his death date. There is nothing else on this monument except the fact that he was a Confederate States general. Well, he made a fortune in Memphis as a slave trader. And he was the original Grand Wizard of the KKK. He led a Confederate massacre of black soldiers and white soldiers, American soldiers, during the Civil War. And this monument wasn't put up in 1865 or 1866 with people saying he's such a hero, we have to recognize him. This monument was built in 1970. 2 years after Martin Luther King was shot in the neck, just down the road from Nashville, Tennessee.
The foundations. The foundation of many problems starts with the individual, and there are factors.
There are factors.
Oh, sit down, Tom.
I am well aware of how I am perceived. But now is not the time for our petty squabbling.
America is a land of opportunity, as promised in our Declaration of Independence, and preserved legally in our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We have amended our Constitution, and we have evolved as a nation. Our people stand proud to support and defend opportunity and freedom for all.
I cannot stand here any longer and be influenced by a man who has dedicated his entire life to sabotaging his own people.
Now, this came to me this morning. In order to ensure victory, we must stop resisting the offer. We circulate the rumor. White folks will go ape, wondering what we will encounter in this new land. They will gnash their teeth. They will even argue is an unconstitutional discrimination against whites.
Everybody, thank you. My name's Casey Kasem, and welcome to Alien Trade Referendum. Just say no! Can you imagine life without jazz? No! Or without the blues? No! Or without rock and roll? No! Well, that's what life would have been like in these United States without the contributions of African Americans. If this referendum passes, and we vote to send dark-skinned people up into outer space, I'll tell you one thing, you can forget about ever seeing another dream team again.
didn't bring any scientists or anything? People yourself? Just entertainers? Yeah. Okay.
This is for the people.
This is for the people.
Eggheads.
So tomorrow, when you pick up your phone to vote in the privacy of your own home, just think.
Privacy of your own home.
And so as we say goodbye to our dark friends and neighbors, we say hello to a new era of American peace and prosperity. For World News Now, I'm Stryker O'Rourke.
Fucking A, Black Lives Matter. I'm in. I'm with you, brothers. Yeah, I mean, that felt racist as it came.
Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we all...
In their own way, they have been doing their best to bring about freedom, justice, and equality and human dignity for the black people in this country.
Long time ago, he's been the victim since brought him to the show. Black man dug the ditches, hewed down the pines, gave his trouble to Jesus.